Let's go through my K-pop album collection, shall we? So I have already made a video detailing my Photocard collection, so I feel like it is only natural now that we go on to my K-pop album collection. I do have multiple spaces where I hold my albums. I have a couple of shelves in my living room, a shelf in my bedroom, as well as a shelf in my office. So we are going to hop around a little bit. I'm going to show what I dictate as the important shelves / my miscellaneous shelf. And then lastly, we're going to go through my signed album shelf. Okay, so this is the top shelf of the first that I have in my living room. You can't see it, but I do have light sticks that are at the very top of the shelf, but this is the first one that holds albums. And so on the left-hand side, I do have all of ATEEZ's box albums besides EP1. EP1 is in the middle above the others. I do have them in chronological order, so it goes 2, then Wave, Illusion, A and Z of Answers album. Then I do have the A, Diary, and Z of Movement. In front of my Wonderland albums, I do have the 2 mason jars that have my either concert confetti or concert wristbands in. And then behind them are the Wonderland and the Fever Part 1 albums. I do have EP1 above them, plus the Ode to Youth photo book. And then if I move my signed Yeosang album out of the way, then I do have the rest of the Fever series plus spinoff at the top. I did have them in chronological order, however with spinoff, I put spinoff at the top because the box of the book is a little bit thinner and I was afraid that the rest of them were gonna crush the box that I had, so I left it on top. Plus the polka albums being up top kind of makes sense too. And then I do have a signed Yeosang spinoff from the Witness album. It is not with the rest of my signed stuff because I thought it would fill out the shelf more, plus seeing the silver Sharpie on the black cover just looks so good that I had to keep it up there. But yeah, that is the entirety of my AT shelf. I do also have both of the Fellowship Tour DVDs that are out right now. The Fellowship Map the Treasure, as well as the Fellowship Beginning of the End. I do have both of those. I do plan to get the next one that comes out. However, they are on top of my gaming shelf because their covers look cool and I wanted to keep them up there. All right, so the next shelf that I have comes with a little bit more trinket style items that are in it. I do live with a roommate and my roommate is lovely and lets me put my albums out here. However, I wanted to make it fair in terms of making everything look nice instead of just an album collection. So this is one of the shelves that we worked on together. To the left is my entire Kingdom collection that I have. I do have the first 4 albums that Kingdom has released, and that was to finish off the insignia, and I just realized that one of them is upside down. Okay, there we go, I fixed it. I think when I had moved my shelves to put in our new TV that I just put that one in wrong, but yeah, so I did get Kingdom's albums to complete the insignia. I did not get any albums further, so the Kingdom shelf isn't going to grow much. I do have my signed postcard for Han from the Ordinary release. I do have that framed up here, plus an old Polaroid camera that I actually found at my work that my boss let me take home. Behind that, you can't see it, but it is a wand from Harry Potter. Both me and my roommate are really big into Harry Potter. However, we don't support J.K. Rowling, and so we've got our wands before all of that went down, so mine is behind there, and I did get Luna Lovegood's wand. And then lastly, for K-pop stuff, I do have my Omega X collection. Omega X is not gonna grow much anymore, at least not in the foreseeable future album-wise. The boys are back, and they do have a single out, however they don't have any albums out, and so I do have their collection there, plus the ticket I have from when I went to go see them on their tour. And I don't have any songs written in music out here because the only ones I have were signed, and so those will be on a different shelf. Okay, the next shelf that I have has a few groups on here. The first groups that are off to the left is the newer Gravity collection. I do have the other Gravity albums stored away somewhere else on a different shelf because I kept them in the rainbow order and they didn't fit on this shelf in particular, so I just have them in a different space. But I do have all of Gravity's albums up until Masterpiece. Plus, I do have a Unicorn Blood that I got from a comic convention that I went to, as well as a little cactus because I love succulents. In the middle, I do have my Elast collection. There isn't too much for Elast, and so completing their albums wasn't that hard. They do only have the 4 out right now, so I don't know when they're going to have a comeback, so they don't really grow as much. And lastly, off to the right is my Wavy collection. I do have 2 takeoff albums. One of them is hidden behind the card cases from the season's greetings, but I do have the entire Wavy collection there, plus their Our Home photo book with their pets. And it was around the same size as their album, so I decided to put them with it as well. But yeah, this shelf is kind of small. There's not really too much to explain about it. I do know that it'll grow a little bit because of Gravity. However, I don't foresee Elast or Wavy making comebacks anytime soon. And so that's why the shelf is still a little small. But as you can see, there are open spaces from albums leaning against each other, but I keep that room there just in case. Okay, the next shelf that I have is a little bit bigger. It's a little bit taller because, as you can see, I have One Us, One We, and Purple Kiss on this shelf. Plus, I do have 2 Taemin albums because they fit above the One Us ones, and I thought that that would be a good spot for them. So I do have all of One Us's albums, including their newest one, Pygmalion. I go all the way from Light Us all the way to Pygmalion. I do have a song written easily off to the side because at that time that was the only tall album they had, so I put it with the One We albums. So you can see I do have the One We albums off to the right. I did go in chronological order, and I know that I'm missing one. However, I can't find it for the life of me. It's the Timeless album. Otherwise, I do have all of their albums there. On the front of my shelves, in front of all my albums, I do have the photocard packs that you could create from the Trickster album. I do also have a fan-made Hwanwoong card from when he was doing the This or That dance. I think it was for One the K. And I had this top loader that just went perfectly with the colors, and so I kept it out there. If you saw my Photocard Collection video, then you will see I do have the other 3 fan-made cards. I do also have a mason jar there that comes from basically all the other tours that I went to. However, 2 of the 3 that were in that jar are One Us, so I put it on the One Us shelf. The other one is The Rose, and I don't have any of The Rose's albums, so I felt it would fit best on the One Us shelf, plus the Pygmalion polka version and the One We CD that refuses to stay in the album. Above the One Us albums, I do have Taemin's Never Gonna Dance Again, Act 1 and Act 2. They are behind each other. And I do also have the entirety of Purple Kiss's discography going chronologically up. So Intro to Violet is on the bottom, then Hide and Seek, then Mem, then Geeky Land, and lastly Cabin Fever with the Cabin Fever polka right next to it. I know that this shelf will probably grow a little bit more. At least with One Us, it might grow a little bit quicker. However, I'm not sure since One Us did just have a comeback and Purple Kiss did have theirs a couple months ago. However, for One We, I know that they do have either Gravity or Gravitation that is out. I don't know if I want to get that one, but the shelf will grow a little bit more, and so I might have to move, maybe I might have to move Purple Kiss to their own shelf so that way I can start stacking albums up top, but we'll see. And lastly that I have is my NCT shelf. I am angling my phone down a little bit, but this is also a tall shelf, so I do have the rest of my NCT albums here besides Wavy. The only reason Wavy isn't down there is because, one, they are an old group of mine, so I did put them with another old group of mine last, and also with the amount of albums that NCT Dream and 127 have, it started to get really cramped on the shelf, and so I decided to move them for space-wise. On the left-hand side is all of my big group comebacks. I do have all of them, and I did put them in a chronological order of some kind. So at the bottom is my 2018 albums. Then I have both the regular 2020 and the repackaged for 2020 Resonance. Then I have NCT Universe, and next to Universe, this really small pink album is Cherry Bomb. Cherry Bomb is such a small album, it doesn't really fit anywhere, so to make sure that regular stood up straight, I did put Cherry Bomb there. Regular is next, and then I do have 3 copies of Regulate behind everything. Regulate is a huge album, and it takes up so much space. I did put them behind, but I do have Johnny, Yuta, and Jungwoo's copies of them because I love them all, and that was also around the same time that Jungwoo started to become active in the group, so I wanted to make sure I got his as well. Okay, I did do a little bit of rearranging just now because I realized that my NCT Dream albums were pressing up against my bigger version of AEO, and I wanted to change that so it didn't get damaged even more than it probably is. So I do have my NCT 127 collection in the middle. I have everything that is more of a hardcover book or sleeved book up top, so that includes Superhuman, both the regular version of Neozone and the repackage, plus the smaller book of AEO. Underneath them, I do have all of the softer cover, the more magazine type covers, and that includes 2 Baddies, Sticker, and Favorite. And to section it off, I do have the B version of AEO right next to it. And then that leads into my NCT Dream collection. I will say NCT Dream is a little bit of a bigger collection because they do just have more out there. So the first album I have is We Go Up, and then I do have We Young underneath, as you can see, that is holding up my hot sauce ones. I do have We Boom and Reload, Hot Sauce. Then I do have the albums that had Glitch Mode and the repackage with Beatbox. And because they are taller, I do have the Hello Future albums off to the side, plus my one Candy album. I do realize that Candy is actually the same size as Glitch Mode and Beatbox, so I might switch that around a little bit in the future, but for now I think it looks good. And that is the last shelf for the first 5-tier shelf of my living room. Okay, so my phone is tilted up a little bit, and so it does look a little bit wonky, but we're gonna work with it. So the top shelf is part 1 of my Stray Kids shelf. I do have every single version of the albums for Stray Kids, as they are another one of my alt groups. Off to the left, I do have all of their mini albums before their first full album. So that includes Mixtape, I Am Not, I Am Who, I Am You, Miro, Yellowwood, and Levanter. I do also have the limited versions for the latter 3. Above them, I do have my District 9 Unlock DVD that I bought. In front of them, I do have a fake plant because we wanted to liven it up a little bit. So then I have all of my albums from Go Live going forward, all the 4 versions of Go Live, plus the 3 versions of In Life, and then Christmas Evil. I do also have Noisy, but I put them up top. I put them up top because they are smaller than the rest of the albums, and so on the shelf they do just look better up there and look a little bit more cohesive if they're all together that way. Then next I have Ordinary, and then next to Ordinary I do have this year's Daikon, or D-Icon, however it's pronounced. I do have Han's version, so I do have the photocard binder that came with it, as I showed in my collection video, as well as the book. And in front of everything, I do have the 3 photocard packs that came with the Ordinary albums, as well as a little mason jar that has the confetti in it from when I went to the Stray Kids tour. And on the second shelf is where we continue the Stray Kids collection. Okay, and on the next shelf is where we continue the Stray Kids collection. On the right-hand side is all 3 versions of Maxident, plus all 4 case versions of My Biases, Han, Felix, Lino, and IN. I did just get INs in the mail, and so my Stray Kids Korean album collection is now complete until 5-star/S-Class comes out, and I'm so excited for that. And just like how I had on the other shelf, I do have it mirrored in a way. So we do have Bangchan's signed postcard on this shelf. That one actually does belong to my roommate because she loves Christopher very much. I have a different Polaroid camera that I found at my work that my boss let me have. To give a little disclaimer, my job does not involve photos or Polaroid cameras of any sort. I work at a shelter, so I don't know why we had them, but I found them when cleaning out one of our old back rooms, and she let me have them, so I said, okay, I'll use them as decoration pieces, because they are cool. Behind them is my roommate's wand from when she went to visit Universal many, many years ago. And then off to the left is my very small TXT collection. I do have Chaos Chapter Freeze, as well as the album with Thursday's Child, and those are the only albums that I do have. I did not get Temptation, didn't feel the need to get Temptation, mainly because those two albums had the concepts and the music genre that I liked. That's why I got them. So this middle shelf is a little bit plain, however, I do like the simplicity of it, and that is why I'm not putting anything else on the shelf. This is my only one-of shelf. They do have a shelf dedicated just to them, specifically because they do have a lot of albums out, and their albums are very uniform, and so I really like how they look on a shelf just all together. I have every single album that they've released besides for Dot Point Jump and Unknown Art Picks 1. When I got into only Dot Point Jump and Unknown Art Picks 1 were the albums or photo books that were not in stock. So I was able to get Lines and Goodness before that went out of stock. So I did start the collection off to the left with Unknown Art Picks 2, since that is more of a photo book rather than an album. And then after that, they are in chronological order for Instinct Part 1 and Instinct Part 2. I do have my member covers in age order, except for Instinct Part 1, I do have Love Place first. For any full member sets of either albums or photo cards that I have, I will put the leader first and then the rest of the members. So for Instinct Part 1, it goes all the way from Love to 9. And then in Instinct Part 2, it goes from KB to 9. Separating my albums, I do have my tour mason jar from when I saw them in Chicago and Toronto. I did put them together since I only saw them within a couple weeks span of each other. I do have all of the Underground Idol albums. However, I only have 4 out here because my Junji and Rie albums are signed by the members from when I went through my fan signs. And then lastly, I do have my Soul Collection, which is the last album that they've released. And so I do foresee them keeping releasing music, and so I'm just going to keep this shelf for them unless I have to move a group somewhere, and then we'll reassess. All right, and so on the second to last shelf that I have is a couple of miscellaneous groups in a sense. On the left-hand side, I do have all of Baekhyun's albums. You can see that I have his City Lights, and kind of hidden behind Delight, I do have Bambi. Those two albums were the same height, so I kept them together. And then I do have all 4 Delight albums, plus all 6 versions of his Japanese release. I was very mad at myself when I didn't order the Japanese release as soon as the pre-order started, because I think his Japanese album is my favorite out of all of his solo albums that he's released so far. I know we should be getting one soon, now that he is back from the military, and I am highly anticipating it. I hope something comes out soon because I am more than ready to start collecting Baekhyun again. And then next to Baekhyun are my signed copies of Overload for Extraordinary Heroes. They are also on this shelf. They are tall like Baekhyun's albums, and so I kept them together. I do have 4 copies. They are just all behind each other. Before I had moved around my shelves, I did have them all on display. However, since I have moved them, there wasn't enough room to display all of the signatures, and so I have my Junhan signed album up front because I think that with the signature plus the cover, I think that looked the best. However, I do also have Gaon, Ode, and Jungsu signed albums. I do have one of each version that I got from the Hello 82 signed album sale that they did. Then next to them are both versions of Deadlock, which I think are my favorite albums cover-wise. I think Overload is my favorite album music-wise, but Deadlock has the best packaging design in my opinion. And next to them I have their debut album, They do look a little bit different. Both the versions are different, and so they are kind of separate. And so the one album that's a little bit different from the shelf is my Eternal album. I do love Youngk's album, and I figured keeping him with Extraordinary Heroes, both being part of JYP bands, I felt that it fit. And again, it's another taller album, so I thought it worked out well. That's the only album he released before he enlisted in the military, but now he's back, so maybe he'll do more solo stuff. And then next to Youngk, I do have Billy. I do have all my Billy albums there, and I am very glad that their albums are cohesive in terms of size. I do like when groups have consistent design size over time. For example, the Stray Kids bulk of mini albums before Go Live was really nice. And then from Going Live forward, how the albums are the same height at least make me really happy. I don't need them to be like same consistency throughout their entire time, but at least with like the versions being the same size is nice. Or a few albums over a period of time does look really well. So there are only 4 sets of albums from Billy that I'll be collecting. The first one, The Collective and Unconscious, and then Village of Perception Chapter 2 and 3. So the only one I'm missing is their second album, which is okay, I will be getting that in the future, but I do have the rest of Billy's collection there. Okay, and so the last shelf that I have in my living room is this bottom shelf, which really doesn't grow as much anymore. So over on the left, I have my Monsta X collection, and if you know from my collecting photocard video that I don't collect Monsta X anymore, and so these are just the albums that I have currently that I don't plan to get rid of. I do have at the bottom, I have Are You There? Then We Are Here, then above that is Follow, and then One of a Kind. And then I did put the albums that were the same size together, so Fantasia and Love Killa are together. And then I did put the English albums next to No Limit because the album size as well as the album style were exactly the same, and so I felt that they fit best together. So in the middle, I do have my VIX collection, and forgive me, I don't remember which came first in terms of the collection, but I do have many of their older albums. So starting at the bottom, I do have the album that Voodoo Doll was on with Hide above it, and in front of the other ones, I do have Jekyll, and I have Leo's cover for Jekyll. Then going from left to right, I have Eternity, then both versions of Ude Vix, both versions of Shangri-La, and then the Kratos, Zelos, Hades albums that they have. Next to them are Chained Up, and then lastly, I have Error, and I just have the albums in a height descending order. And lastly, over on the right are my Super M albums. I don't foresee Super M doing anything in the near future. So for Super M, I do have their first album up top. I do have 10 and Baekhyun's cover, plus the group in the back. And then I didn't get all the versions of Super 1. I did get one green, the Target exclusive orange, and then both of my biases covers for the blue versions. This shelf is not going to grow or change anytime soon that I'm foreseeing. I don't really plan to collect anything further for any of these groups. The only exception would be if VIX has a full 5 or 6 member comeback, but again, I don't foresee that happening ever, unfortunately. So this shelf is just going to stay as is unless I can find other groups to fill it up a little bit more. But again, that is it for the shelves that are in my living room. So we are now going to move into my office. Okay, and so now we move into my shelf that is in my office. These are groups that are a little bit either slower, or I have again stopped collecting, or simply there are too many albums for them to be out on the other shelves. So up top we have all of my Ghost 9 albums. So I do also have the Teen album that Taesung, Woojin, and Jinwoo were in. In front of my albums, I do have a Woojin standee that came from the Control album. But behind that, I do have pre-episode Door, pre-episode Wall, Now Where We Are Here, Now When We Are in Love, Now Who Are We Facing? And then at the bottom of the middle are my Arcade V albums. They do jut out a lot more than the other albums, and so I put them underneath, but above them are all of my 17 albums that I have. So I do have 2 carat versions of Face the Sun, I do have one version that my friend gifted me of Your Choice. And then I have 3 copies of FML. I have my 2 favorite main versions, plus one of the boxes of the Carrot version. Next to them, I have 1 copy of an Ode. I do want to get all the copies of an Ode. A longtime dream of mine is to complete Seungkwan's An Ode Photocard Collection because I think that their photo cards are absolutely gorgeous, but that is a longtime dream. And then off to the right are the rest of the Gravity albums that I had mentioned. I do have them in rainbow color order, and they fit so perfectly on the shelf, I did not want to move them. Plus, I do have Wonwoo's Carrot version photo book for FML right there. I do have a couple others, but I am trying to trade them for other members that I bias, so he's the only one up there for now. All right, and so the next shelf that I have has a couple of groups that either don't grow at all or grow very slowly for me. Off to the left is my entire boyfriend collection. I do have many of the boyfriend albums. I am missing one. However, I don't have their old album because it would be impossible for me to find. There's no real good way for them to be put on my shelf, and so they're just there in chronological order. So I do start from Don't Touch My Girl, and I do on this shelf have all the way up to Never End. I do have their new project album Adonis, but it is on my signed shelf because I did get a signed copy. Next is my P1 Harmony collection in the middle. It is hidden behind my 2 Stray Kids standees that I have. I have Felix and Han, but I do have all of the versions up until Zero In. On top of Zero In, if you can barely see it, I do have the English version of Do It Like This. And then above them is actually my ATEEZ perfume box. I did get the ATEEZ perfume. It does smell wonderful and I love it very much. However, it's in this giant box and I didn't know where else to put the box, so the box is here. And then next to P1 Harmony, I do have both IVE and Pixie. Pixie will not grow anymore. However, I didn't know where else to put their albums because I also did not want to downsize on their albums. So I do have all of Pixie's there, plus the couple of versions of IVE's album that I have. I do know once I get their first full album that I'm probably going to have to rearrange the shelf a little bit because they are, from what I've seen, decently tall. So I might have to change around things. We'll see how it goes. But I do have both versions of 11, all 3 versions of Love Dive, and then I'm only missing 1 version of Afterlike. But yeah, this shelf won't grow as much. The only collection that will grow from it is going to be IVE, and so I might have to rearrange IVE. Maybe I'll put IVE and Purple Kiss on the same shelf together since they're both girl groups I collect. I don't know, we'll see. Next up is a album shelf that grows but also doesn't grow. It's split up 50-50 or maybe 60-40 with 2 groups. On the left and in the center is my GOT7 collection. I do have all of their albums from 7 for 7 up until their most recent comeback when they signed with Warner Music Korea. I do also have a couple of solo albums, and so the solo albums I have are Young Jae's Colors, Yugyeom's album, and then behind Bam Bam's B, I do have Bam Bam's Pandora. I think that his boxes are ridiculously big and there's no good way to store them. However, having Pandora there does lift up the smaller albums, and so I do really enjoy that. But depending on if I get Sour and Sweet or not will depend on how I have to rearrange the shelf. I do know that I want to collect Young Jae's Sugar. I still need to buy that album. I love the album. It's so much fun. It's a good summery album, so I'll definitely be listening to it a lot more. And then the other, give or take, 40% of the shelf is EXO. I am, I believe, pretty much done with EXO in terms of buying their albums that I need to go back and collect with. I did only get a couple of the older albums, and then I didn't actually really collect until Obsession. Obsession was my favorite comeback that they've done. And then I do have a regular version and then the member versions for Baekhyun and Sehun of Don't Fight the Feelin'. But I do have only the EXO-K versions of albums because trying to find EXO-M is really, really hard. And then I do have 1 copy of EXO-SC in there because I found it at my Barnes & Noble, and I love Sehun, and him and Chanyeol's unit is just so good, so vibey, so I had to get one. The next shelf that I have is my entire Twice collection. So I do have all of Twice's albums starting from Summer Night, and so To keep with the height, I do have Fancy You off to the left, but then I go into Summer Nights, and then the rest of the book albums I do have going in chronological order up with the different photocard pack holders up top because I just like to keep them and I thought they would be a good display piece. I do have Nyan's album up front because it is a great visual piece, but behind her I do have the albums. These aren't in chronological order. They were just in whatever order looked best. So I do have between 1 and 2, Taste of Love, Ready to Be, and then underneath them, I do have Formula of Love. I might rearrange this a little bit now that I have Ready to Be since they are also books, but we'll see how I feel in the future. I might have to change around my Twice shelf a little bit because I do see that it is kind of bowing. And so depending on when they have their next comeback, how big it's gonna be, I might have to, again, add them to another shelf. So either do that or maybe move them to the bottom so that way the bottom has the most support. But again, that'll be a when the time comes thing. So the only other shelf that I have in my office is this top shelf. This whole shelf isn't entirely K-pop dedicated, just this top one. So the top shelf does have Zikers. Off to the left, those are all of my signed albums from Hello 82. Then next to them, I do have my last Baseball Club Season's Greetings. And then after that, it just goes into all of the either digipacks or Japanese releases. So I do have a jewel case wall that I can briefly show. But in terms of all the digipacks that I didn't want to put up there, they are all on this shelf. I do also have the covers for albums on here as well. So as you can see on the bottom below Pygmalion, I do have the ATEEZ covers for their Paradigm album. I didn't want to put the covers on there just in case they ripped or slipped out, so I did take them out of the cover. And then here is a quick overview of my jewel case wall. Any album that I had that has a jewel case version of it, I did put up here, as well as my 5 Seconds of Summer albums, because they are still one of my favorite Western artists. However, all of my Japanese releases or jewel case versions of albums that I collected are up here. Alrighty, so the last shelf that I have is actually in my bedroom. This is my signed album shelf, and so this will have all of my special albums that either mean a lot to me or are signed, as well as random other signed merch. So I will actually get a little bit closer for these cubes because they are a little bit harder to see what is all in them. And obviously, as you could tell, this is not just signed related stuff. I do have my nerd stuff in here because I do also enjoy anime, Pokemon, a couple other nerdy things. All right, so in the top 2 shelves that I have, up to the top left, I do have one cube that is entirely Ghost 9. So I have my OT9 Now When We Are in Love signed album. So I do also have Dongju and Taesung's signature on that album, as well as my Ghost 9 fan signed album that is back there. Plus I do have a Kangsung photo card that was just an extra one that I got when I bought one that I needed for my collection. And so I had a top loader that fit the theme, and so he just stays on my shelf. To the right of it, I do have all of my One Us signed merch, and so let me move the stuff in front so you can see the albums in the back. So I do have 2 signed albums from their Blood Moon tour. I have a Hwanwoong signed Binary Code album and an OT6 signed Blood Moon album. I stated this in the previous video, however, I want to state it again. I don't support Raven. However, I got this album before all the allegations came out. I do not want to sell the album as I do love all of the other members, and so I will just choose to keep it for my own. But that is enough of that. I do have 2 Ito signed things as well. I have his Malice signed album from the most recent tour that they did, as well as I was able to trade for his VIP tour ticket. I think I pulled Goni at first, but I was able to trade someone for Ito, and I was just happy to get one of my biases, so I have 2 signed things of his from the tour. Moving on to the other cubicle shelves that I have, my one on the left is a little bit more messy, so I'm gonna move my Rie fan signed album real quick so you can see what else is behind it. So behind my Rie signed album are all of my AT signed albums. And so in the very back, you can see that I have a Fever Epilogue signed Hongjung album. In the front, I do have a blue version of Wooyoung's signed album. And then in front of that, I have Mingi's. And then behind Mingi, I do have Jungko's signed album as well. So a fun little story about Jungho is that I have pulled his signed album with every single Hello 82 signed album drop that they've done. I pulled his green version from Fever Epilogue. I have his blue version from Movement. And then the only signed copy that I bought for Spinoff was his. I pulled his and I was like, you know, Jungho, I love you. However, please give another member a chance. And so I ended up trading my Fever Epilogue Jungho for Yeosang's spin-off album. And then I didn't need 2 spin-off albums, and so I am actually selling another one to my friend because she is also Jungho biased. And I felt like it would only be right for him to go to somewhere that will love and appreciate him. I have him once. I very much so would rather have one album of each member rather than multiple albums of the same member. My hope for the following ATEEZ drops are to get at least one of each member. However, if I get multiple Yeosang, I'll probably keep them. I did not get any from this most recent Hello 82 drop because I feel like unless they did sign the covers with a silver Sharpie, I don't know if the cover will look good because it is very busy. So that's just my personal preference. However, I do like the Movement ones, especially Mingi's. I think how Mingi does his signature where he fills up the entire space looks absolutely beautiful, and I am so glad I have it. I'm also really glad I have it because typically whatever I have in my collection, I also consider it my girlfriend's collection, and having a signed Mingi album of her Ultimate Bias makes me very happy, so that way she can join in on having that as part of hers. And as of right now, I do have my Rie fan sign album up top. I do need to move things around a little bit because I don't know where I want to put Junji and Rie's, but I do want to put them on the same shelf together, so we'll figure out what I want to do. And then on my other shelf, once I move my Obanai figurine, I do have my BF Adonis signed album there from their promotional event. Up front, I do have my Felix signed Levanter CD, and then behind Felix is my OT7 Awake album. The only member that didn't sign it was Wonjun because he was not in the comeback. But I did get the M-Wave album still because Elas is still one of my alt groups. So now that I'm done with the very top shelves, I will move on to the middle 2, which are the only 2 shelves I have that have signed pieces with them. All right, and so here are my 2 middle shelves. On the left-hand side, the only thing that I have on here is my BF photo book with my top 2 biases. My top 2 biases in BF are Kwangmin and Minwoo. And so they had a picture together, so I opened it up to that picture and put it on a stand. But next to them is one of my Omega X signed Swim albums. This album in particular is Kevin. I do have a Kevin signed album, and his signature does take up a lot of the cover, which is really nice. His is just over to the left because it did not fit on the other shelf. But as you can see, I do have another fan sign album from only one of, it's Junji's cover, and behind that one, I do have 3 more signed Swim albums. It's kind of hard to see these signatures, but I do have Taedong, Huichan, and Junghoon. I have all of their covers, and Taedong and Huichan are 2 of my biases. Junghoon is my wrecker, and so that is why I do have Kevin off to the side. I'm sorry, Kevin, I love you. Your signature is gorgeous, but I have my biases, so. I want to figure out how I want to display them because with the big bulky albums, it's kind of hard to display it, as well as with Kevin. And then I believe Junghoon and Huichan's signatures being so large and Taedong's being so small, I don't really know how I want to display them. But again, that'll be something that I figure out once I rearrange my shelves again. So that is it for my entire album collection. I know that this is going to grow in the future because as of recording this, my birthday is in a couple of weeks. And depending on the money I get, I will be buying more albums. So I will try to do album collection videos at least twice a year, probably like a June, December, or a January, June, something like that. We'll figure it out. Thank you so much for watching my video. Thank you so much for watching my channel. And I look forward to seeing everyone on my next episode of my K-pop collecting journey.